Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Scott Stedman podcast. I hope you are having a wonderful day. The weather is finally getting cooler. And again, hopefully that's still true when this episode drops because we have so many episodes in the queue that we've recorded that who knows when this will drop. Um, but it is getting cooler. And you know what I realized, Micah, when I was uploading stuff and uploading some episodes, we're getting dangerously close to the 300 episode mark, which is insane.
I I noticed that the other day. I was like,
Yeah.
man, we've got 300 episodes.
I think we're at like 288 or 287. So we're going to be hitting 300 pretty soon.
We'll have a party.
Yeah, we'll have oh, just you and me. We'll wear party hats and blow noise makers. Yay. Yeah, so other than that, man, how's things been? I saw that you celebrated a birthday.
Yes, on
You have to think about it.
well, I forgot what day it was. This week, it was this past week, and I
Yeah.
was trying to think of what day it was. It was Tuesday, and so yeah, one year closer to 40.
All right,
Um,
man.
so and then my little girl's keeping me on my heels, so I might as well not like count forward as far as numbers when you get older. Just go backwards because they keep you younger,
Yeah, that's true.
unless you're Peter.
So, yeah. Well, my
And
son
get
yesterday was throwing up, so he didn't even go to school. He was just throwing up all morning.
oh
But he went to school today, so that's good. But anyway, that's dealing with kids in school. So today we're going to be kind of talking about an interesting topic, and that has to do with adjectives, labels, and things that we kind of put on the church and Christianity. So, for an example, Micah, a lot of times I think growing up, there was always kind of this language that we shouldn't be ashamed to be a Christian and we should probably talk about how we're Christian. And it really, you either were a Christian or you were not a Christian or you were Buddhist. Sometimes people may even say they're Catholic to kind of disassociate between being a Catholic Christian and a Protestant Christian. And those were kind of the labels. And now I feel like probably within the last almost 10 plus years, it's almost like you have to put an adjective in front of a Christian. You are a conservative Christian. You are a moderate Christian. You're a progressive Christian. Um, and I feel like with those extra labels that we tag onto the term Christian, it has kind of caused a lot of disruptions in people's faith and even disruptions on how we talk to one another, how we communicate with one another, how even kind of the idea of how we even kind of live out our faith with other Christians who may have a different point of view on a specific political topic, worldly topic, or even a piece of theology, and how that has kind of gives people anxiety and stress talking about that. So I don't know, like that's something that I've been noticing over the last 10 years about these labels. Like what about you? Have you been noticing the same thing? Are you kind of like feeling like nope, not dealing with any of that at all, or I've not been seeing any of that at all?
I mean, I've seen it. Obviously, we've if you haven't seen it, you're blind, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially with I think we did an episode back in what was it, 2020, 2021, and we talked about the riots and the January 6th thing, and we went over this article and we were
Yeah.
talking about how Christians participated in that and was it okay or not or what whatever. However, I don't know what changed and where it changed. Um, and maybe I was just too young and naive to see what was going on. But like, I've always loved history. I've always loved U.S. history, and especially presidential. Like, who's the president? Who's their vice president? Who they run against? What do they stand for, etc. And I think about it, and it's like, what what changed?
Mm-hmm.
And when I think about that, I honestly think right around the time that Barack Obama became president, and there was a lot of not necessarily like tension because of race,
Mm.
but it was just different because we had never had an African American president before. And um, I think if you pair that with the combination of him running against Mitt Romney, who was a Mormon, who was a very devout Mormon,
Mm-hmm.
like you have this combination of like, oh, we've got this guy here who's a different cultural, uh, phenomenal, speaker, etc., very charismatic, and then you have this guy who's very religious, and people may or may not understand what Mormons believe. Uh, and so that kind of that's where I kind of think things kind of picked up in our lifetime.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Do
and
you
and
think?
I would agree with you with that. I really would, because there was a situation at the church I was pastoring where I wasn't in there, my wife was, and they're in Bible study. And this is when I was pastoring up in Youngstown, Cortland area. And there's this one older woman who's, you could tell, very conservative with her faith. And she was talking about, and it was during that election where she said she was going to vote for the Christian. And it kind of, it took my wife aback, because she's like, okay, well, I know Barack Obama's talked about him being a Christian. Mitt Romney's a Mormon. So, but she always makes fun and bashes Barack Obama all the time. So who is she talking about? I mean, it was like, who is this lady talking about? Who she's voting for? And I think that kind of, and I believe that was kind of the case. I mean, I think maybe race kind of played a little bit, but I can remember people saying, well, he's not even Christian, he's Muslim. And that was like the big thing. It's like, we need his birth certificate. And I feel like that kind of became a tension point. And I don't think that was anything that Obama did, or anything that Romney did to kind of get the Christian vote, even though he's like, Mormon, which is a kind of a whole different cultural thing. But you kind of got that sense that there was some tension over the label Christian. Because obviously, if you're just sitting there and you say, I'm going to vote for the Christian, there'd be a couple of people who'd be like, oh, so you're voting for Barack Obama? It's like, no, I'm voting for Mitt Romney. It's like, wait, what? And I feel like ever since then, there has been um, that tension. And even when the 2016 election came up, and there were people, and even within like pastors groups in Virginia, when I go to these pastors meetings and they're talking about who they're going to vote for, like literally, there'd be some pastors who say, well, I'm going to vote for Donald Trump because he's a Christian. And there'd be other pastors going, uh, no, he's not. Look at the guy's lifestyle. That definitely does not reflect the teachings of Christ. And it kind of became, I think if the in 2000, what, 2012 is when the Romney, was it Romney and Barack Obama, was that 2012? Like, if that was the
Yeah, because
election, right?
08 was McCain and
McCain, that's right.
Obama, and then Obama reran in 12, and then
And that was when we had Romney, yeah.
yeah,
So if 2012 was taking the lid off the jar, Then 2016 was shaking the jar with the lid off and just getting mess everywhere.
with the
Um,
carbonated beverage in it.
oh yeah, absolutely. And what I find fascinating, I was listening to a podcast and there was a speaker and she was talking about this concept called the double slap. And the double slap, as she described it, is she would say, let's say you were participating at a church, a specific church culture, and let's just say that church culture's more kind of on the conservative side of your church culture. And you grow up in that church and you're told, we love Jesus, we the scripture, we follow the scriptures, we want to be do good in the world, we want to try to set an example and be a light in the darkness and show a good example of Christ. So you're in this culture, you're being fed, you're getting all this messaging about what it means to be a Christian. And then all of a sudden, you start to notice there's a shift. You start to notice that there's some things that are being maybe said from the pulpit. Maybe there's certain literature that's coming into the church. Maybe there's certain conversations that are happening around the Sunday school table or in your small groups where you're really kind of getting kind of the ick in some ways. Like you're feeling like, man, this doesn't really like look like the type of Christianity that A, Jesus is teaching about, and B, kind of what I was originally taught when I started coming to this church or I was taught as a kid. So you kind of get this like shock. So you get this shock value, you get that slap across the face. So then you decide to go over to the other camp, like a more progressive Christian. And you go over there and your mind's blown because like, oh, they have a liturgy. They actually do care about the scriptures. They actually study the scriptures. They love Jesus. They want to do good in the world. And it's almost like this whole new world has opened up for you. And like, oh, cool. This is what true Christians should be. And then eventually you get to that same point where you start to see certain things being talked about, maybe certain literature coming in, certain conversations that are happening around the Sunday school table that don't look like kind of don't look like Christ and his teachings. So that's the double slap. So now there's people who are trying to live out their faith as authentically as they can, but they feel like the messages that they're getting within the churches, whether it's in a more conservative culture or a more progressive culture or anywhere in between, it feels like none of this looks like the teachings of Christ. And it's kind of one of those things where people kind of left reeling and they kind of are shooken and they don't really know what to go and where to respond or what is the right church, or you just kind of have vagabond Christians who are just kind of staying at churches for a couple of reasons. And then once the one thing starts smelling a little weird or funny, then they leave and they go to a different church and they go and or they just kind of embrace the weird stuff and go, well, I don't agree with it, but they have a good kids program. I like the worship music. I'm just going to kind of stick around. And there's not really something. I feel like there's not really this call for people to grow in their faith or be devout in their faith because the institutions that we go to, they're always putting these different labels on that don't necessarily maybe mix with how I'm reading the scriptures or kind of how I grew up in the church. I know that was a lot of me spewing, kind of getting that thought out there, but um, I don't know. Do you have you ever come across that in your own personal faith journey, or if not, have you ever experienced that with other people, friends who are kind of reeling with these labels and having these difficult time with trying to grow or find a foundation that they can kind of build and grow up their faith because these institutions are too um politically driven in some cases.
Yeah, I think especially over the last 8 to 10 years, um, we can be like, hey, we're Christians, but hey, we're gonna be going to church, but um, it almost feels like their message, albeit becomes more political than it does um, about Christ, like you're talking about. And so I tend to get a little bit frustrated because that's all people want to talk about when they get to church, especially the older friend. And it's like, are you here to talk about Jesus or are you here to talk about the president?
Mm,
And it just gets really old really quickly. And I also think too that like I think a great example of it is when Jesus goes into the temple and he flips the tables over because they're gambling and casting lots and all this stuff. And you walk into a church now, whether it's a small country church, mid-sized church, whatever, and it's almost like everything has to be about politics. And one of the things that's like super concerning to me is that like, yes, we need to have those conversations, but there's also a time and a place for it. Um, it, you know, the church is facing enough persecution as it is, and then you go to add um, some of these more difficult conversations with the LGBT community, the topic of abortion, the topic of race, the topic of whatever. And for me, I'm like, I feel like you're playing with fire because you don't see anything that I just mentioned in the Bible.
mm-hmm.
So if you're preaching, you're teaching, you're leading your flock as a pastor or a leader or an elder, and you get up there and make some outlandish comment about um, same-sex marriage or
Mm-hmm.
um, I lost my train of thought, but like other illustrations of people that the political ideas that are going on in our country today. But like I also think too that like what about you know it seems that people are having these conversations, but we're not preaching or teaching these conversations because we're afraid we're going to give the wrong answer and people are going to get upset, people are going to leave, this, that, and the other. But then it's like, you know, I it's it's something that needs to happen, and I do find it kind of ironic that you know, especially like in the state of Ohio, when they overturned Roe versus Wade, the abortion bill in the Supreme Court,
Mm-hmm.
they were literally just pushing that back to the state so the folks in the state could decide. And people
Yeah.
got all tore up about it. And so then, you know, what does the church do about that? Did they take a stand? Did they have a conversation with, the congregation, say, you know, this is where we are. If you don't feel comfortable with what's going on, please reach out and we'll have a conversation. We can meet one on one.
Mm-hmm.
But it's something that's definitely needed to be talked about. Like, can't just ignore it forever because it's here, it's now.
Yeah. And it's yeah, I agree with all that. And it's fascinating because even when and this was when I was still in Virginia when Planned Parenthood got defunded in Ohio. And I remember Carson, who we've had on a show on our show, kind of said, "Okay, local churches, Christians, what are you now going to do to help assist these people?" because it wasn't just about abortions. Are you going to start helping navigate people about with family planning? Are you going to provide diapers for new mothers of newborns? Are you going to provide food? Are you going to do mammogram testing or STD testing? Like all these things that Planned Parenthood did, like, are you going to step up and help these people who relied on these services? And it kind of brought up a good question. Like, okay, yeah, like if you think that this organization is unethical and they shouldn't get any type of funding from the state or from the federal government, okay, then where are the church organizations that are going to step in? And I know we had a organization in Virginia because they were talking about it and it never ended up happening. But even Comfort Care kind of made the announcement saying, hey, if Planned Parenthood gets defunded in Virginia, we have no way, we don't have the capability to be able to do what they did. And they were kind of even saying, like, yeah, even though we do the same thing as Planned Parenthood, we kind of do it differently and we have a smaller thing. Like, if that goes away and all these people start coming here, we are not going to be able to meet everyone's needs and do it effectively. So I think that was one of the reasons why it never passed in Virginia to defund. Um, at least I don't remember. It's been years ago, but it's stuff like that. And like I said, that has nothing to do with the scriptures. It's like all politics. And I think a lot of times we have gotten so used to media, whether that's news media, social media, where they're constantly mudslinging, dragging the other side through the dirt, calling them whatever different names and labels that if I was a progressive Christian and Micah, you're a conservative Christian, and we're having a conversation about, you know, maybe a different view, a theological view, let's say, and all of a sudden we can't talk to each other because we've gotten so used to, well, you're a conservative Christian, you believe this, and you're evil and whatnot, and then you're saying, oh yeah, well, you're this, you're progressive, so you're this, and you're evil, and we can never get to a point where we can either come to a point where we agree to disagree, but we can still remain friends, or even if we disagree, at least I can learn a little bit something about your point of view on this topic. You can learn a little bit of something from my point of view topic. And even though we don't change each other's minds, at least we come with a better understanding of
At
where
least you're
other
having a
people's coming
conversation.
from and just having a conversation. And that's the point. A lot of times I don't really see, even when we get to like the news stations where it's like roundtables and they do have someone who may have a different view, it's never let's have a conversation. It's like, hey, here's this. And then once they say something, it's like, oh yeah, well, you're evil, blah, blah, blah. And it's like guerrilla warfare in some ways. You just kind of get jumped on. And it's like, and then of course, social media just takes the sound bites and just kind of throw that up there. And then that's kind of how it is. And that's what I think a majority of people take away from it. They don't read the articles, they always look at the headlines. We don't actually know the full story. We don't watch the 2 hour interview. We just want to hit those 30-second clips. And then we can basically draw our own conclusions on what that was about. And yeah, I think even just recently, it kind of hit my mind because, we saw that Erica, is that her name? Erica Kirk, Charlie's wife. Is that her name?
Yes, yes, yes.
Like Erica, you're at this press conference and, she says that she forgave the person who
Yep.
shot her husband and people were cheering because, that was Christian response. And then you saw Colbert kind of say something very similar. And I was moved by that. And, talking about how political violence is not the answer. And then, with Kimmel being canceled and Kimmel coming back on the air and he doing his speech and even him talking about his faith and he follows the teachings of Jesus. I mean, there's a lot of people who goes like, "There's no way Jimmy Kimmel, he's not a Christian because he doesn't think like me. He doesn't vote like me. How can he be a Christian and bash, you know, bash the president, who is a Christian, as some people proclaim and some people don't. And at the same time, you also have other people. Well, Charlie's not a Christian because he had certain rhetoric and certain teachings that were against LGBTQ and race and women and everything. And it's just noise. And I think it's so easy to get caught up in the whirlwind of noise, but it's hard for us to be rooted and tie ourselves down to a strong foundation where even if there's someone across from me who I disagree with, I can have a conversation with them. I can talk with them and be able to not get swept away by the wind because I am rooted in a strong foundation. And I believe if I'm if I'm rooted in the foundations of Jesus Christ and his teachings and what the Bible teaches, and even if I do have disagreement with somebody, I also have to know that this is a person that is created by God, someone who is valuable and precious. And even though I may disagree with them about who knows on a variety of topics, at the end of the day, I can go and say, you know what? This is my brother. This is my sister in Christ. We're both Christians. We may have different political views about stuff. We may have different um, cultural views. We may have different theological views. But in the end, we're both Christians. I don't think that this person's wrong or evil. And I believe that even though we're different, I can still be friends with them and I can still love them as a brother or sister in Christ because they're Christian and I value who they are as a human being. And
It's well,
I think sometimes we forget that when we get sucked in the whirlwind of media and labels and adjectives, because we no longer see that person as a human being. We see them as the label, as conservative or progressive or liberal or deplorable or snowflake or whatever terms that have been thrown out in the last 10 plus years.
I think a good word for it is distraction.
Mm-hmm. It's a distraction. Yeah.
Like if you look at the media stuff and all these articles and everything, it's it's a distraction. It's used to distract what's really going on in the world. And
Mm.
when that distraction happens, you're not having the conversations needed to, you know, move the needle in a positive direction.
Yeah.
And I find it really, I wanted to get through an episode without talking Church of God specifically.
Oh, darn it.
But it's like, ever since Jim stepped down as general director, it just
Mm-hmm.
seems that there's this lull. And
Mm.
granted the general director is like an interim and he can't do or say a lot, can offer input, but I just feel like it's dividing us even further.
Mm.
And, you know, I don't know Monte uh,
Yeah.
from Adam. I've never met him, never talked to him. He could probably be the nicest guy on the planet. And I'm sure he is. But the fact of the matter is, like, it's just stop just making it about LGBTQ. Stop just making it about race. Stop just making it about
Women in ministry.
women in ministry. Exactly. It's like if you want to do something about it and make a decision to move on. Stop dilly dallying around and not making, informed decisions that can help bless and benefit the church, both locally, nationally, and internationally. Um, But what do I know? Just the guy in
Yeah.
Southwest Ohio.
Yeah. Goodness. Yeah, and that's crazy because you know, I think the difference, and I'll end it at this with the Church of God thing. I think the difference between what I've witnessed and seen with the United Methodists with their split is even though you had people within this denomination that had polarizing different views on a specific topic, once it was done and once everything kind of went through the process of splitting and having churches option to stay with the UMC, go with the global UMC or global Methodist, or going independent, after all was said and done, they just kind of went with what they know. They kind of continue to proclaim Christ. They continue to be as good as they can be with focusing on the gospels as much as they could, with not getting without too much focusing on a lot of the political stuff happening in the world or even the political stuff happening within the institution. And I just feel like a lot of times I get seasoning of the gospel in the Church of God, but my main course is always some type of Church of God issue or worldly issue, and that's it. And we're going to sprinkle gospel on it, and it's not the other way around. Um, and with that being said, it's for a denomination that's as small as ours in the Church of God. It's not going to. It's just going to continue to drive wedges and divisions and everything else. And, Monty's role's not to be the great communicator of everything. His thing is just trying to navigate and figure out what we can do to operate better so that when the actual general director comes in, we can actually do something about it or can really have a direction of what changes and what conversations need to be had. But the fact that it took forever to find a general director, and we decided to go the interim route because things were taking too long. And now Monty's going to be with us for what, like eight
Year.
months to a year or so. And even with that, I still have not heard anything about the general director position.
They don't know how to
So,
communicate.
so is this going to be like, hey, we want you for a year, but then like any other Church of God congregation, we have an interim for like 2 to 3 years while everything continues to go down the trash, down the chute? Because that's what it seems like. And that's kind of where it's headed. And very thankful, are we even going to have a denomination when all this is done? And I know I'm using denomination, not movement, but, you know, I don't even know if we can call ourselves a movement because we're not even moving. We're just sitting around stewing and being angry about stuff or not really taking care of the simple things that we need to take care of within our midst. So that's my 2 cents. Um, so friends, let us know, like, have you gone through this journey of what as the double slap, where you feel like you've been on one side of the coin, felt like that wasn't jiving with you, things have shifted, so you were shocked, so you kind of see things from the other side with maybe rose-colored lenses, and you realize, hey, even though there's a culture here, it still doesn't align up with Christ. So maybe you're in that position where you feel like you're just being a tennis ball, bouncing back to one side to the other. Maybe you're someone who's just kind of tired of all the political nonsense that has kind of seeped its way into the Christian space. And maybe you're too sick of all these labels. But friends, that's going to be it for Micah and I. Thank you so much for listening. Hope you all have a great weekend, and we'll be back on with another episode. Take care. Thank you for listening to the Scott Stedman Podcast. The Scott Stedman Podcast is made possible by support from our listeners. We thank listeners like Patty and Scott, whose support goes to this podcast's continual growth and maintenance. If you want to support this podcast, you can do so in a number of ways. First, feel free to give us a 5-star rating if you enjoyed this episode and share it with your friends. If you'd like to financially support the Scott Stedman Podcast, you can go to the website ko-fi.com/the Scott Stedman Podcast. That website again is ko-fi.com/the Scott Stedman Podcast. Thank you so much for listening.